So good morning, everybody. It's really lovely to see you all here. And good morning to everybody online. I think we have 34 participants online, so that's great. And I'm here just to tell you about what our Ignite network is about. So I'm Becky Lunn. I'm the head of the Centre for Ground Engineering and Energy Geosciences at Strathclyde in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And this is a £1 million network. So it's being run over 4 years. And our aim, our overarching aim, is to support sustainable, abundant, clean and equitable energy for all. And we want to do this by harnessing the talents of energy researchers from all backgrounds. So I just want to start by saying why energy, really, and maybe this fits with why EPSRC picked energy for this area. So if we look at world energy consumption by source, you can see this is data from 1965 to 2021, and it's just on the percentage of energy consumption that we use from different generation options. And what you can see is that whilst the percentage of low carbon energy, so renewables and nuclear, has increased, it's still only 16% of our total energy consumption worldwide. And we still have 84% of energy consumption that is high carbon emitting, basically. And that has to change. And it has to change really quickly. And even if we just look at electricity, so the previous graph was on energy, which is transport, heat and electricity, basically. So even if we look at electricity, which is where most of the renewables are contributing, you can see that that sector of renewables has increased, but it's not even 50% of our electricity consumption. And you can see that that rate of increase is not keeping pace with the rate of increase. So it's not, we still have a rate of increase of hydrocarbon generation. So it's not offsetting the hydrocarbon generation. And that is a really significant issue. The rate of increase has dropped over the last few years, but it's still increasing. So not encouraging. So the International Energy Authority produced the report Net Zero by 2050, which is a roadmap for the global energy sector. And their quote in it is that achieving net zero emissions by 2050 will require nothing short of the complete transformation of the global energy system. Now, that is a huge challenge. And if we're to achieve that, we need to lever everything we can to do so. So there are a number of research papers now that show that inclusive, diverse groups are not only morally better, there's not only a moral imperative, but there's also a scientific imperative. They are more innovative, they bring greater scientific impact, and they lead to increased economic growth. So there is a real driver to do this. And if we look at the demographic in the energy sector in the UK, there's clear need. So on the right-hand side, you have the working age UK population. There's only data here for gender and for Black, Asian and minority ethnic, because that's all I could find for the energy sector. But the reason that women are less than 50% is the difference in retirement age, in case you're wondering. So that's the working population. And you can see that both women and Black, Asian and minority ethnic members of the population are hugely underrepresented in the energy sector. And there's a clear mandate for change. So we're looking to address some of that mandate. So I wanted to say a little bit as well about what happens within universities. So I think as a young researcher, I definitely thought this, there's no question about it. I definitely thought that I don't need support, excellence will be enough. I was completely convinced that I was as good as my male colleagues and that I would manage to succeed. And all the evidence shows that actually, that on average, that is not the case, and that you are discriminated against at all stages in the system. Why has that stopped? Oh, okay. So if we look at systemic barriers, there's a lot of evidence out there now for systemic barriers in the system. And here are just one or two. So this is about women here. This is that women researchers are cited less, largely because they tend to publish in smaller groups. Don't have as much time for networking. Often, the smaller your publication, your author list, the less likely you are to be cited. And that there's also inequity in gender amongst editors of journals, which is also creating systemic barriers. We have only 1% of UK university professors that are Black. That was published in 2021, which is an appalling statistic. The scientific, there's not very much data actually on LGBT+, very little, but what there is, particularly in STEM, shows that individuals can often are harassed and suffer from career limitation in STEM subjects. And there is also evidence around disabled scientists that is emerging. Not very much evidence out there. There's a report from the Royal Society of Chemistry and one from the Royal Society, both of which show that disabled individuals in the system are disadvantaged. I want to say a little bit about research funding. One of the main drivers for moving forward in your academic career is research funding. It's probably the key thing that gets you promoted above and beyond everything else. And funding success rates are not equitable. So this is data from EPSRC. It doesn't look any better across UKRI, but I've picked this because in STEM, things are particularly stark. There is more underrepresentation than in many other areas. So if you look at the funding success rates, I've highlighted on the left-hand side the success rate for 2018-19 between the difference between white individuals and Black, Asian and minority ethnic. You're almost half as likely to be successful in your grant application. And there is a statistically significant difference between men and women as well, but it's not as large. If you look on the right-hand side at the award values, the biggest difference is actually between men and women, and the award values are half that of their male counterparts on average. There's no published intersectional data across UKRI, and there's no disaggregation of the BAME category as well, and you only have to look at the professorial data to note that there are very big differences in BAME, so particularly around the difference between Black and Asian individuals within academia, the outcomes are very different, and there's no data. So I don't want to be all negative. I want to say that that there are ways of getting around this. So I'm going to highlight a particular paper, and some other initiatives that other organisations are looking at. So this particular paper looks at data from the Hubble Space Telescope, and here this is published in 2020, and they have success. They have removed the bias in their applications between men and women, is what they were looking at for this. So they have over 15,000 applications that are within 6 different grant rounds. And the historic success for female applicants was lower than that for male, and significantly different statistically for that for male. This is a huge amount of grants, so they've got really good, robust statistical data. And they tried a number of things on consecutive cycles to address this problem. So they started by removing the names from the front page of the applications, and that didn't make any difference to the difference. They then removed the PI name and replaced it with the initial, so that you couldn't tell the gender of the individual by just looking at the name. You'd actually have to go and Google or know them to find out who they were. Then they tried listing alphabetically, so you didn't say who the PI of the application was in the following round. That didn't work either. And then when they got to the final round, they removed all identity of the applicants, and it was dual anonymized, and the assessment on the individual was done afterwards. So as just, do you have the capability to deliver in your organization? Yes, no. And when they removed that, it changed everything, basically. So they've then compared, they've got a huge data set here, so they've compared the 5 grant rounds after anonymization to the grant round beforehand, and there's a significant difference. Female PIs are now significantly more likely to be accepted than they were before, and there's no difference between them and their male counterparts anymore. And then they had a look at why. So they thought, well, why is that the case? So they looked at reviewer level data, they analysed it, and what they found is that male reviewers rated female PIs significantly worse than they rated male PIs before, but not after anonymisation. So I just want to point out so there are ways around these issues that we need to be adopting, and there is good research in this area. There are other initiatives that address some other issues that are being trialled by other organisations. So the Royal Academy of Engineering has increased the number of applicants that universities are allowed to make into fellowships. They've given additional diverse applicants from underrepresented backgrounds are an additional quota in the application process. So not in the decision, but in the application process. And they're looking to see whether that brings much more equity in the diversity of fellows. And the Royal Society of Edinburgh are doing something similar. So they also have increased, they have a committee that's looking to proactively bring forward applicants for fellowship from diverse backgrounds, and also from business, which is also underrepresented in the RSE. So what do we want to do on Ignite? So we want to build on this kind of approach. So traditionally, EDI initiatives have been running in universities for 4 decades, or at least 2, and they're not making any difference, very little. And the reason they don't make a large amount of difference is because they focus on what's called an EDI deficit model. So they focus on the individual and not on the systemic barriers. So they focus on mentoring and training staff that are in the system to jump over the hurdles that are there in front of them. And they also focus on diversifying the pipeline in without really looking at why people don't come. So we want to change the conversation, and that is the premise of the Ignite Network. So we want to change that conversation. We want to identify systemic barriers, challenge organisations, and help them to design disruptive initiatives to remove those barriers. And I don't just mean research councils, I mean funders, universities, they're equally important, and so are journals and other organisations that have a significant impact on individuals in research. So who are we? Okay, so this is the Ignite Network. This is the management group. There's myself, Marco, and Claire, who are all here at Strathclyde. And then we have a number of other organisations that are represented on the management group and that are partners on the network. So most people are either here in person on the management group or are available online. So from Imperial College, Nottingham, Bristol, Manchester, Queen's Belfast and Manchester sort of combined appointment, and Brunel University. So these are the co-investigators that were on the project and are now on the management group of the network. So what we propose to do, our objectives from the network are not to start from scratch. We want to build on the good work that's been done. EPSRC have funded a set of fantastic projects under the Inclusion Matters programme, and I'm sure they will talk about them. They have an independent report that I would encourage you to go and have a look at, that's just been put onto the website, which is on outcomes from that portfolio. And it was a funding of 10 research projects looking at EDI across the sort of STEM space of EPSRC. And we want to build on some of the really successful projects in there. So, for example, reciprocal mentoring that happened at Nottingham that was very successful. We've started that at Strathclyde already. And this is something that came out of STEM Equals. We had a number of different project initiatives within the university collecting data, but we also spent a lot of time, Marco in particular, I'll just highlight him, in producing really accessible looking outputs. And that kind of presentation of outputs is what we want to do to get into the leadership of the funding bodies, of the into government and into universities, and push our outputs out to universities. And I really encourage you to contribute to what we're doing here. We have network objectives. So these are just some examples of the data we collected under our STEM Equals, which was an Inclusion Matters project, but where we identified challenges and support instances of them in the university. But what we're trying to do is unpick in the network, build on this experience, unpick and expose and quantify systemic inequality in the research sector as a whole, design or identify, if they already exist, let's use them, design or identify disruptive initiatives, monitor the success of our interventions, and as I said, accessibly disseminate those in an accessible fashion through the network. We are going to do some mentoring, but we want to take a slightly different approach to that. So it's not just about advising, it's also about listening. So focusing on a more reciprocal approach to mentoring, and also focusing on advocacy and championing of individuals. Advocacy has made a big difference in my career. I've had a couple of people that have championed me for roles, and that has made a very big difference to my career. And it's a really important thing that we champion individuals from underrepresented backgrounds. And then finally, we will collect some data, but it isn't the main focus of the network. There are areas where data is really required and where it's lacking. So some areas of underrepresentation, and definitely intersectionality, where there's very little information available. Okay, so I'm almost done. So some specific network activities. We will do baseline data collection across energy and monitor impacts of our interventions as we push them out across the universities. So we're going to collect data across the partner organisations, and anybody else that would like to do so from other universities is very welcome to join in. Then we have, so that's being sort of led at Strathclyde. Brunel leading on mapping out organisational interventions, so looking at what is out there already and across company space in energy as well, so not just the academic sector but also the R&D in the industrial sector. We're also looking at diversity awareness and representation and language, things like that in energy publications and on social media and web pages. See Yourself in Energy is focused on Break the Pipeline, so looking at working in children, young children at primary and secondary level, through to thinking about how we pull people from disadvantaged backgrounds who do come to university into a research career as well. Mentoring and advocacy is being run through Bristol. Nottingham and looking at the bias in the research metrics and have a project there. And finally, we also have a project working with working class energy researchers, which will be based between Belfast and Manchester. So we have a number, that's the core work that we're going to do as network partners. There's flexible funding on the network, as I'm sure you're aware. So there are two different pots of funding. One of them is actually for energy grants. So it's for PIs that are from underrepresented backgrounds, can apply as PIs, and we hope to get sort of cross-university groups for funding, and to increase the number of PIs. The idea is to fund smaller projects and then support those PIs towards bidding for larger amounts of money to EPSRC and beyond. So increase the number of underrepresented PIs on UKRI grants. The second fund is one that's being launched this afternoon, which is EDI initiatives. And these are around, can be collecting data where we don't have it, but also identifying barriers, designing disruptive initiatives, and hopefully pushing those out through the network. So you'll be able to apply for funding to do that. We have an advisory board. So our advisory board is chaired by Professor Rachel Oliver at the University of Cambridge, and hopefully they're going to keep us all in check and give us good advice. We have a lot of very senior individuals listed here that are from a range of places, so industry, universities, catapults. Apologies if I've missed something, but from a range of different universities to keep us in check and make sure we're going on the right track. And finally, this is the reach we had. So this is the support we had when we made the bid. So this is actually a figure from the original bid. So these are all the individuals that supported this. Many of them made videos for me for the interview. Thank you very much for those that did, and saying why they thought Ignite should be funded. And as you can see, we have really good geographic spread in the grants. We have a really good spread of energy areas so that we can push out into different areas of energy, but also importantly into social sciences. So we have individuals in the social sciences too. And what we want to do across the whole research sector is strive for sustainable institutional change. So thank you for listening. That's the Ignite network, and yeah, you'll hear from us over the workshops this afternoon, and you'll be hearing from us over the next 3.5 years or something.